All right. So today, this episode is actually going to be more on the nutrition and more of energy needs. So this was supposed to be a three-part series on protein, fats, and carbohydrates, delving
Okay.
into what they are, what's important, and most importantly, how to calculate and how to set your own needs, right?
Mm.
Especially when it comes to the the importance of whether or not to what you should be doing when bulking, cutting, and so forth. Now, when I was coming up with it, I realized something that's most important. People, like anything else, there has to be some foundation or some basic understanding as to why you do or why we do what we do, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think we're going to start with that. So it's going to be 4 episodes of 4-part series, starting with the first one, the actual like energy needs and why we do it. So this entire episode, we're going to cover a few things. Number one, the nutritional hierarchy of importance, how calories affect muscle gain, why and how to track your TDEE, which is your daily expenditure, energy expenditure,
Mm-hmm.
finding out your maintenance calories, very important, tracking your NEAT and cardio expenditure, which I'll go into why that is important,
Okay.
massing and fat loss calories, and last but not least, the decision making of it all.
Okay.
Okay, so now when it comes to the nutritional hierarchy, we also want to do it is what we call it's an order of importance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have your pyramid, you have the top, you have the bottom. So at the absolute top, when it comes to nutrition, we have adherence and sustainability.
Mm.
Right below that, let's just use numbers lah. Number one, adherence and sustainability. Number two, we have calories.
Mm-hmm.
Number three, we have protein, fats, and carbs.
Mm-hmm.
Number four, we have food sources and your micronutrients.
Okay.
Number five, you have your nutrient and meal timing. And
Okay.
number six, and last but not least, you always have your supplements.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the
So not
order of
supplement on top
importance.
lah.
No, 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 no.
Alamak. I thought it
Unfortunately,
was all about the supplements. The next best supplement is gonna crack it.
yep, that's the biggest problem that I mean, I wouldn't say the biggest problem. That's the main problem that we face when it comes to nutrition. Everyone
But it's
thinks
not
they
about the
can,
gym, bro. I say, what supplements do you use? Not
yeah.
like how consistent you are, how well do you eat, do you prep your own meals? No, no. What supplements do you use?
If it's up to me, supplements will not even be there. But unfortunately, it is an important component of structuring your nutritional hierarchy because whether we like it or not, with the world the way the world is advancing and people becoming more and more shittier with the nutrition, supplements do help.
Hmm.
Now, with that being said, in these 6 items, you want to take note that if a lower item in that hierarchy violates the priority of a higher item,
Mm-hmm.
we can consider it as of negligible importance. Okay, now what does that mean? I'll give you an example. If you eat 6 meals per day, but you miss a meal,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then what that means is the total calories is still more important than the nutrient timing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for example, you eat 6 meals a day is more important than nutrient. Now, another example is, for example, you just eat like cold food, like chicken breast. You didn't heat it up; you just eat it cold. You eat your tilapia cold and broccoli and brown rice and whatever because it's quote unquote hardcore, or you didn't have time or whatsoever to heat up your food. That becomes that just means that sustainability is more important than food sources. It's not
Mm-hmm.
sustainable what you're doing. You see what I mean? So that's what it means to when a item of lower item on the hierarchy, it starts to it violates the priority of a higher item. So most
Okay.
importantly is adherence sustainability. Is eating this set of meals uh, sustainable? It's not. If you eat 6 meals a day, but you miss one meal, like those 5 meals that you ate, you still manage to get your calories in. It's still it's still important. It's still you still accomplish the more important part of the
Okay.
hierarchy.
Okay. I get what you mean.
Yeah. Okay. Now the calories and functions is going to be a quick brief through. Calories providing energy for it provides an energy substrate for all bodily processes. You need calories to breathe. You need calories for your organs to run. You need calories to walk, talk, sleep, move your fingers. You need all those.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, it restores your energy stores. Now, in the context of bodybuilding, what is the primary food source that we use? Glucose, right? We need glucose to sustain our heavy bouts of resistance training. Eating calories in the form of carbohydrates restores those energy stores,
Yeah.
but protein and fats also restores other parts that
Yeah.
we deplete during our training.
They have
It's
their own importance in your training.
exactly, all the macros have their own importance when it comes to bodily function, and not just to resistance training.
Yeah.
On top of that, you fuel your recovery processes, which is eat. If you eat well, that's how you actually grow and get bigger or stronger. It's not the direct training itself.
Correct.
It's what comes after that that it
Mm.
enables you to get stronger and build more muscle.
Correct.
So you need those calories for that. You next on the list is you rebuild damaged components from training. Uh, Calories are also a primary recovery strategy before other nutrition strategies. Obviously, sleep is also the next most important thing, but in the context of what we're discussing, calories first, right? Then the other thing is the concern is the caloric need for muscle gain, maintaining, or fat gain and fat loss. Okay, if you don't structure it properly, you may not be pushing yourself towards the goals which you intend for yourself. Now, there are several factors that affect muscle gain and retention of that muscle. Primary number one will be genetics. Unfortunately, you if you're born with shitty genetics, we can't change that.
Mm-hmm.
Just so you know, genetics, like people think that this term genetics, you know what, so what, he has good genetics, or so what, I can work myself into having better genetics, or I can outwork someone with genetics. Yes, that may be arguable, but if someone who has genetics and works hard, I'm sorry, but between the two of you, if you have poor genetics but good uh, workmanship towards training, the person with the genetics is always going to win.
Yeah, I mean, if someone is already born with uh athletic abilities within their genes, lah,
Yeah,
so to be say, like some people, right? You just put them on the field and they can run the fastest. They have not had any prior training and they're already running like a bullet.
correct.
So imagine with training. So these people are built to be athletes, for instance, like you have those kind of, or some people who just gets mad easily.
Yep,
For some particular reason, their brain just makes those connections so well.
correct.
And it's sad to say that they do have the upper hand, and you definitely have to work harder against them. But if they are a working hard kind of person, then they've got the best of both worlds, lah.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
Genetics in bodybuilding, you can tell who the type of people. When you look at them, you can tell that these people were made for lifting because their muscle insertions are good. They have a good balance, a good frame. Everything is just
Mhm.
like it feels like they're like drawn out of a comic book. You know. So
You
those
you
are
have, yeah, I mean, uh, they just do the Greek gods before they even started, lah.
yeah. You could get someone who's genetically blessed. He does
Like you,
pull-ups.
lah.
He, I'm not genetically blessed, that's for sure. Like, but
Yeah,
these
you
people
see that
like
bias.
these people do pull-ups. They get their chest gets big. That kind of genetics.
Yeah, exactly. They do
So
curls and their triceps get bigger. What the
exactly.
hell?
So another thing would be factor. Another factor would be sufficient training stimulus to force the adaptation and training experience.
Mm.
Right. Third on the list, you have your PEDs, which is performance enhancement drugs. We're not going to get into that, but it's just a factor that we should consider because it in the world that we live in right now, PEDs are running rampant. I remember you showing me a video on Instagram about people openly now selling steroids on social media. Uh, it's promoted by local bodybuilders. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Another factor would be the magnitude of surplus or deficit. Very important. Sufficient protein and carbohydrates and fats, sufficient sleep and stress management, body fat percentage, meal frequency, nutrient timing, and supplements. Now, this is not a hierarchy. I didn't place them in the order of importance. I just listed them down. All right.
All right.
Now, moving on, we have the calorie level effect on protein response. What does that mean is we all know there's the three phases that we are either in or currently doing, which we have the number one phase is the hypocaloric state, otherwise known as the calorie deficit. You've got your eucaloric state, which is your maintenance state. And last but not least, you have your hypercaloric state, which is the calorie surplus, right?
Mm, mm,
Now, in the hypocaloric state, there has been studies that show that a 20% calorie deficit has actually been shown to reduce protein synthesis by as much as 19% following a meal. So again, do not be alarmed with these numbers. When people just look at the surface information, they'll be just like, oh my god. But this is a normal process. We're just telling you that what is the effects of it. Now, a 500 calorie deficit for 5 days in this particular study decreased protein synthesis by 27%, and resistance training only restored rates to resting levels. An increased rate of protein as fuel source, which means when in a calorie deficit, your body requires a much more increased rate of protein intake as a fuel source, because in a deficit, what's the first thing you reduce? Carbs. Yeah. Amongst that, you have your decrease in mTOR signaling and increase in AMPK signaling pathways. So on top of that, the same bout of training has less effective is less effective, sorry, for a growth response.
That's for
So
sure.
that's why it's very difficult to actually build muscle in a deficit. And instead, what we're doing in deficit is just trying to preserve whatever lean tissue that we've already gained from our previous phase if you were in a surplus.
But I'm wondering whether this will still apply to someone who is obese. That means if they're already obese to start with,
Yeah.
I've read that even if you're in a deficit, you still can put on muscle mass simply because you have such a surplus of energy stores.
Yes. So that is one of the things. Also, another thing, if this person is obese, he would also be considered a novice when it comes to resistance training.
Mm.
So we both know when an introduction of stimulus to resistance training happens, the deficit, even with the deficit in place, they will grow muscle as well. They will also, because they've sort of grown for throughout a prolonged period of inactivity per se. So it will happen to them. They are what you would consider probably the, not say outliers, but the phenomena of gaining muscle and losing weight applies to these kinds of individuals. And on top of that, you have your maintenance state, right? So in a maintenance state, you have your anabolic response to resistance training is still suboptimal.
Mm.
It's not saying that you can't grow, but it's not at its best. If you truly want to grow muscle, you have to be in a calorie surplus. In a maintenance state, the loss in proteins with protein accretion is at a balance.
Mhm.
So it's you're neither here, neither there. You're neither gaining, you're neither losing. But you do have suboptimal. It's a suboptimal phase to maximize recovery and growth, right? And last but not least, your calorie surplus. People on this phase or people that go onto this phase, number one, being on the surplus would help to stimulate anabolism, even without resistance training. Which I'm going to pull up a study after this, but it is possible to actually like the effect of anabolism can be stimulated without the resistance training. So on top of that is people on a calorie surplus would optimize protein synthesis and minimize proteolysis.
And of course, I think the context of this really matters. I mean, if someone says, if that's the case, I'm going to chuck down some burgers
Yeah,
in a surplus.
yep.
As
That's
long
not how it.
as protein synthesis goes up, so does fat synthesis.
Yeah. So the thing about that, the dirty bulking, right, is actually this is going to be covered in the three-part series on the fat intake, because people think that, oh, as long as calories are equated, eating a more fat diet, blah blah blah, won't make me exactly fat. Well, yes, that is true. Calories equated mean you would still um, not put on fat if it's all equated, but there has been some studies to show that if you eat more fat, or if you're in a surplus and you're eating more fat than any other component, just keep in mind that the fat that you're consuming is already in a state for your body to use to store it as fat in your adipose tissue, right? So I'm going to cover that in our fat episode.
Okay.
Now, when on the point of just now which I made, that people were able to actually increase increase the state of anabolism on a caloric surplus without resistance training. These are three studies that was pulled. The first study was Rosenick in 2007. Now, subjects in this study were all untrained subjects. They were put on a 2,000 calorie surplus diet per day.
Surplus.
2,000 calories surplus per day
Wow.
for 8 weeks. They all increased fat-free mass by as much as 3 kilos. That's 6.6 pounds. And a minimal fat mass versus control group added no mass and ate at maintenance calories.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. So the second study was Garth in 2013. These were well-trained subjects with only a 600 calorie surplus, and or it says here ad libitum, so it's basically a small surplus with about 2 to 300 calories for 12 weeks of resistance training period. Now, the individuals gained in muscle mass were not significantly different, but the large surplus group had 5 times the fat gain. So the large surplus group versus the small surplus group, the difference was 1.1 kg versus 0.2 kg.
Mm.
So in this study, right, it showed that yes, you would have gained weight faster or even perhaps put on more muscle, but you also incurred a quicker rate of fat gain as well,
Mm. Especially in trained subjects.
especially in trained subjects, correct. Now, the last study, which was done by Ribeiro in 2019, in a male bodybuilder, this male bodybuilder had 6,000 calorie diet, right? This was in male bodies versus a 4,500 calorie diet. These bodybuilders were resistance trained for 6 days per week for 4 weeks. Now, the bodybuilders in the 6,000 calorie diet, the muscle mass increase was 2.7 versus 1.1. 2.7 in the 6,000 calorie diet bodybuilder versus 1.1% in the 4,500 calorie diet. Now, the rate of fat gain in the 6,000 calorie diet was 7.4% versus the 4,500 calorie, which was only 0.8%.
Wow, that's a lot of difference.
That's a lot of it. The difference is significant enough. So if you guys want to see that study, it's Ribeiro et al. 2019. Very nice
We
paper.
can probably tag it in the description later.
Yeah. We'll tag it in the description. It's a very good study to read. So as you can see, yes, in the muscle mass they may have put on 1.6% more than the lesser calorie group, but they also incurred close to 6% more fat gain. So that's something to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in regards to the calorie deficit group or the calorie deficit, right? Calorie deficit adaptations when you're trying to lose weight, everyone always goes like, oh, 3,500 calories is equates to 1 pound of fat, so that's how much you should lose, right? However, there was a study done by Camps in 2013, which says that a 500 calorie deficit does not always equal to 1 pound of fat loss. Because the reason for this is because metabolic adaptation ranges from individual to individual. So it's not everyone's not always going to lose 3,500. Not everyone's always going to lose 1 pound of fat on a 3,500 calorie deficit.
Meaning what you're trying to say is if I was on a 3,500 kilocalorie deficit per week,
Yeah.
it's not 100% all coming from fat.
No.
Yeah.
No. It could be only 70% or 50%. So to go with this, it's a bit of a how you put this. It's different because everyone's different. Like you mentioned, there's an obese individual versus a well-trained individual. If that were the case, then our job as coaches would be so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to a deficit, we both know that you can always run or incur the risk of soft lean mass loss or muscle tissue loss. So the rate of tissue loss during a deficit is related to the size of the deficit. In a study, a weekly loss of 1 kg versus 0.5 kg over the course of 4 weeks resulted in a 5% decrease in bench press strength and a 30% greater drop in testosterone in women. This study was done by Mero in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
Another study showed that a weekly loss of 1.4% versus 0.7% in athletes during a caloric restriction for 4 to 11 weeks resulted in fat mass reduction of 21% in the fast group and 31% in the slow group. The lean body mass increased 2.1% in the slow group. So this study goes to show that the group that did a much slower or longer period of weight loss sustained a much better rate of weight loss, fat loss, fat mass loss, and also
Gaining
gain,
fat mass.
gain gaining lean body mass or retaining whatever mass that they currently had. Now, the rates of fat loss, right? Rates of fat loss for ideal body mass retention should be in the ranges of 0.5 to 1%.
Per week.
Anything per week, correct. Anything more than that is doable, but it's going to eventually run the risk of incurring muscle tissue loss.
Mm.
Now, with that being said, it's also like it's when you first start a deficit, you're not always going to get this perfect 1%. In a lot of cases, you may exceed that. You're going to exceed the 1.5% early in a deficit, with especially with someone with a much higher body fat.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a leaner individual, if you're, let's just say, in the maybe 10 to 13% range of body fat, you're going to have a much slower rate of fat loss. That's because once your body becomes adapted, the adaptation process, the metabolism, etc., it's going to become different. It's a different ballpark altogether. So the more fat or the more leaner you get, the the challenges in becoming even more leaner is going to get higher and higher and higher.
Mm.
That's why it's never sustainable to be super like super lean year round. All right. Now, oh yeah, there was another research study that showed that research on bodybuilders increasing their energy deficit much later in the stages of contest prep for preparing for a bodybuilding show had the most, if not the greatest, loss of lean body mass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of the dips in testosterone can be quite jarring.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, with that all just being said, what does this mean for a surplus and a deficit? What does it mean for massing and cutting? Right now, when it comes to massing, basically muscle growth rate becomes slower as you advance.
Mm-hmm.
Right, as a novice or as a beginner to get to bodybuilding or whatever it is, you can afford a much larger surplus. Right, but as you become more and more and more advanced, as you get several years under your belt, you tend to need only or tend to be able to handle smaller surplus for as you get advanced.
I think because your body has become so efficient that it's metabolic adaptation, uh,
Correct.
it doesn't waste too much energy anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So because there's lack of wasting energy, because like think about it, right? When someone is trying to do a squat, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
the more technically proficient you are, the less energy you waste. The less
Correct.
technically proficient you are, the more energy you waste trying to stabilize the entire movement. So
Correct.
as you get more and more trained, you're less likely to burn excess calories simply because you're getting very efficient at it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So I think this is partly the reason why you can only handle a smaller amount of surplus as you're getting more advanced.
Correct. So when it comes to cutting, obviously having a plan is very, very important, especially a timeline. This allows for the deficit to be very manageable. If you just go on a cut thinking that, oh, I'm gonna cut until I reach X amount of body weight, that's a terrible idea. Right?
Mm,
You need to have a timeline and a plan to follow, because during the cut, if you're just thinking of, oh, once I reach this number, I'm good, it doesn't work like that. You may end up reaching that number, but I can guarantee you, whatever comes after that, you're going to be crashing, or you're going to result in a rebound if you don't manage your cut properly. You do it too aggressively, the results, the downsides can be aggressive as well.
okay. All right. Cool.
Okay. So here's just a few tips for you guys when it comes to programming calories. If you want to get big, if you're going on a massing phase, you ideally want to try to eat 5 to 20% above your maintenance calorie. And for a weekly weight change, you're going to expect or look to see anywhere between 0.25 to 0.5% weekly gain per week, right?
Mm, mm.
As it comes to fat loss, anywhere between a 20 to 30% below maintenance level is a good place to start with, or is a good place to be in. And a zero point 0.5 to 1.5% fat loss per week is also, oh, sorry, not fat loss, weight loss per week.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
So there is this another topic I wanted to talk about,
Okay.
but it's going to be a bit long if I do include it. So what do you think? It's the P ratio.
I think that P ratio is something that we should cover on another day because I think that's a bit more intricate because
Yep.
it's in relation to obesity and so on, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think that will be a good topic for you to discuss on its own itself. It's a big topic.
Okay. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
uh, Now, the main predictors of muscle and fat gain: number one, adherence and consistency. Number two, genetics. Number three, training and cardio. Number four, nutrition. And number five, recovery. So here's what not to do when it comes to deciding these things: going back and forth on your gaining and cutting phase. So it's very common to see someone who's very lean and he's thinking like, I want to get bigger, and then they go on a gaining phase and they start to see their ab lines start to disappear. They get scared and then they pull back, they go back into a cut. So they're jumping back and forth, never truly allowing for their body to gain that muscle, simply in the fear of not being able to see their ab lines.
Yeah. I've got people who come to me like, can I come to you for a gaining phase, but just 3 months? Wow. Like what you try to gain in 3 months?
Yeah, yeah. Exactly, and like they're so scared. The thing is, when you are trying to put on new tissue, and you're trying to gain muscle, some fat gain or fat gain in general is totally normal. You won't be able to see your ab lines as detailed as you would when you're at like 12, 13% body fat. It's just not
Yeah.
going to happen, right? When you go on a gaining phase, depending on the length, if you're working with a coach, he'll probably tell you like, oh, if you want to gain muscle to look like this, you're probably going to have to go at least 6 months. And this is if you're a novice or at least an intermediate. If you're advanced trainee, then it's a different story entirely.
Would you have to go longer?
I'm taking the entire year of
There
2024
you go.
off.
I would expect it to go longer. I mean,
Yeah,
if you're gonna gain match, you got to probably use a whole year of just doing that.
yeah. And when I spoke to my coach, and he told me like basically like, oh, okay. Um, Basically, the feedback from my shows were, I'm still too small. Yeah, I'm
So
still
I
too
stood
small.
next to you. You are not small.
And I need, okay, not say too small. I'm just like the areas which I need to bring up in
Bro, you're
relation to
comparing
other.
yourself to other peaks, bro.
Yeah, no, I mean like the areas. The feedback from the judges is that my back is not wide enough. It's not big enough. So I need to spend time bringing up that area.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, at the level you're competing, you are competing against other bigs.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. No one is coming there looking small. So when you're
right.
comparing yourself against other bigs, then you definitely might look smaller than them, though in reality you are bigger.
Correct,
So
correct.
yeah.
So here's what to do when you go onto a building phase. You want to make sure that you have an extended and focused mass building phase. When I say focused, there has to be markers that you achieve along this phase and not just body weight. Like,
Mm,
okay, I mean, body weight is obviously a good metric to see whether you're gaining muscle or gaining muscle basically, but it's not the only one. Performance, recovery, sorry, performance, whether you're getting stronger from training session to training session, that is also another important metric. And on top of that, you have to continue to optimize the environment in which you are trying to build muscle, especially when it comes to partitioning fuel for that.
yeah.
So now, what to do? Bulk or cut? If you're someone like this is, I've just pulled an example for a bodybuilder. If you're a bodybuilder, right? The typical contest prep time is anywhere between 16 to 30 weeks. And most of the time people think that getting in contest shape takes 12 weeks.
No.
No, it's a really unrealistic number. like I think you're confusing that with peaking, and even in peaking as well, you get some people that go 14 weeks, maybe even 16 at most. So 16 should be the ideal time. 16 to 30 weeks. 16 would be the lowest. 30 would be the most.
Mm.
And even in the 16 to 30 weeks prep time, the typical body weight loss that you can expect from this range would be anywhere between 10 to 14. So if you're someone who's competing, you want to make sure that you stay within this range, to stay close to this range, so that when you start your prep, you know, okay, if I'm currently at 20% or 21% of body fat, and I can only afford to lose a maximum of 14%, that puts me at somewhere between 4 to 5% already. So that should give you an idea of what you should be doing.
Mm.
So in regards to, that's for cutting, right? For massing, you should have at least you should expect at least a 10 to 14% fat gain from, or coming off a cutting phase, or yeah, if you're already lean, this should be a number to expect. So you have anywhere between 30 to 45 weeks of massing before you need to actually start dieting. So if that's where you are right now, whether you feel like, okay, I need to put on muscle, this is the kind of like timeline that you look at if you're looking to put on muscle, if you're looking to lose fat,
Mm.
right?
That's like 8 to 10 months of massing, lah.
I mean, yeah, it's truly like a lot of people have this idea that they can achieve a certain level of physique alteration or body composition in 10 weeks, 12 weeks, you
And then
know,
they cut again.
and then
Again,
they cut again.
yeah, yeah. And you realize that you end up, whatever you just gain, you end up losing it all during the cut anyway.
Correct,
You know,
correct,
it's like so I think what you're trying to say, you need to spend time to put on enough supply so that when you go into a cut, though you're not going to lose some, you don't go under what you were previously.
correct.
Yeah.
So that brings us to our next question: can you body recomp? Right? Basically, what body recomposition means is that you add muscle and lose fat simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the situations that allow for such a phenomenon to happen is, number one, in detrained individuals. Okay, detrained meaning that you've gone a very prolonged period, at least maybe 4 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks of no training at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then you come back to training. Yes, there will be muscle and fat loss happening simultaneously. Muscle gain and fat loss happening simultaneously. If you're a complete novice, never lifted weights before, this is a phenomenon that can happen to you. Steroids or performance enhancement drugs. Steroids does allow for this particular situation to happen, where you can simultaneously add muscle and lose fat.
Yeah.
There's been many studies on this as well. Another thing is what you mentioned just now: obesity and skinny fat. Right, obesity and skinny fat. And last but not least, suboptimal training. Now, there are also situations where a recomposition is unlikely to happen. Number one, you've hit your genetic ceiling. Number two, you have an optimized training and nutrition plan. Number three, you're lean. You're very lean. And number four, you've trained to a particular degree. So if you're a consistent trainee in your current thing, all right. So these are the situations where you can and you cannot sort of lose fat and gain muscle
Mm.
simultaneously.
Mm.
And right, so we're almost reaching towards the end. Just a few more tidbits for you guys there in regards to total daily energy expenditure. Why should you track it? Number one, you want to be able to manipulate your body composition accurately. It helps with your time-oriented goals. You need to understand your body's current homeostasis,
Mm-hmm.
and you also want to understand adaptive thermogenesis. It's very important when you're trying to cut weight. And last but not least, you need to remember it so you can manage your adherence to your program. Now, in when it comes to all of this, there's something called your, what's it called? Yeah, your TDE. If you think of uh, like a pie chart,
Mm-hmm.
right? You think of a pie chart. 70% of your total daily energy expenditure comes from your BMR.
Correct.
The rest can come from your NEAT, your TEF, and your T.
Yeah.
So Just remember that BMR is your basal metabolic rate, whatever calories that you need to function from a day-to-day basis. When it comes to, and this is a question I get asked a lot, how do I find my maintenance calories, coach? Most of the time, we just direct them to the internet, or you can just find a calorie calculator. But you'd be surprised, even a lot of them can still get those things wrong. They don't know how, like, especially the activity level
Mm-hmm.
tracker, the activity level number, like how active are you?
Mm-hmm.
Some people who do a desk job can still put very active because they think they play badminton on the weekends or every other night. They're this active person.
And I, without fail, I get people telling me that, oh, just exercising is gonna fix all of it, and
Mm,
they think that exercise is just gonna burn because their watch says so. Uh, Exercise is gonna burn them 1,500 kilocalories
hmm
from walking. I mean, walking fast. I'm like, you have to walk for a very, very long time for you to burn that many calories. And even like you do resistance training, right? The average person only burns about 250 to 400 kilocalories
Correct.
during resistance. I'm not talking about a hard sesh, maybe you can go up to about 600 kilocalories.
Yep.
So don't overemphasize. And 600 kilocalories is not much. Probably a burger will settle it,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So people overemphasize the usage of, exercise for fat loss
Correct.
a bit too much. Exercise does increase your energy expenditure. Don't get me wrong. As what Luke says, in part of your TDEE, there is the energy expenditure component, but you have to
Correct.
understand that only accounts for what, 10 to 15% of the entire thing.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's not a lot. Your BMR takes up a lot. Your need probably takes up. So if you're getting about 12, 15,000, you're clocking in about 12,000 steps a day. Yeah, that is probably going to contribute more. If you're a person who's constantly fidgeting, moving about, one walks about during work and all these things, those are not exercise. But because you're
Mm-hmm.
constantly moving, you're going to expend more energy there. That can go up to about 20% of energy expenditure.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, eating things which are more fibrous, rich in protein, less processed, all of this will increase what is known as your thermogenic effect of food.
Correct.
So like what you said, if you guys just look up a chart of what TDE is, you will see that your excess energy expenditure is not that big. And
Correct.
more so when you're doing it like say 3 times a week or 4 times a week tops.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So now, how do you find your maintenance calories? It's quite simple. You want to track your calories and macros for 2 weeks, and you want to calculate your daily average. So that looks like you track your body weight for 2 weeks. You subtract the week one average from the week two average, and this will tell you if you are gaining or losing weight. So, for example, 1 pound is 3,500 calories. You multiply your weight difference by 3,500 and divide it by 7 days per week to get you a daily surplus or deficit that you are currently in.
You probably gotta edit the what you just said.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
people
It's
people are having like that, the triangle, everything flying around at the moment.
it's not that difficult. I can even put it in edit like a box or something, right?
Can do that.
Right. So I think I'll just add the box in later so I'll show you guys examples of how it's done. I'll see if I can do it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Okay.
don't overthink it. Don't overthink it. Set up the diet after 1 week. You will know if you're gaining or losing weight.
Yeah.
All right. Last but not least, you have your NEAT, which is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is the largest variable factor depending on activity level. So your activity level can range between 200 to 2,000 calories depending on where you currently are. So step counters are, we count them as a proxy for NEAT. 2,000 steps is the equivalent to 1 mile, or otherwise 100 calories. Right? It's a tool that we use to manipulate our energy expenditure. Very good. And we also use it to monitor for decreased energy expenditure. So if you're actively getting 10,000 steps a day and then you're maintaining weight, losing weight, or whatever it is, uh, if you suddenly go from 10,000 to 8,000, if you had a reduction in energy expenditure and your weight goes up, then we know these are the metrics that we can use to assess whether to move forward in terms of lowering food or increasing energy expenditure.
Mm.
The benefits of this is it's a primary output driver when you're cutting. It's also another ability to keep food high in your off season, or if you're trying to gain weight. Sometimes you have these people saying that, "Oh, coach, I can't eat anymore. I'm so stuffed. I'm not digesting." Having them get a good step count actually promotes a better digestion and also circulation of them food in the body. So this is basically common knowledge, but a higher step count per day, which is about 10,000, is associated with lower cardiovascular disease risk.
Mm-hmm.
Like 90-minute brisk walk is is what the American Heart Association recommends to doing on a per week annum. Like you clock in anywhere between like 150, 150 to 300 minutes
Yeah.
per
Per week.
per
Per
week.
week.
Yeah, per week. So yeah, it's really important that these are all variables that you take into consideration when you are preparing for whatever it is, whether it's gaining or cutting. Cardio is still important. I hate when people tell me that I don't do cardio in my off season because I want to lose weight or muscle. Because I'm trying to gain muscle, I shouldn't be doing cardio. I'm like, that's so dumb. All right. Okay. And yeah. So basically, just as it. When it comes to decision making, when it comes to adjusting calories, the general rules are make one change at a time. Don't make two changes. It's a very common mistake I see a lot of people do when they're trying to lose weight. They study up their cardio, they reduce their food intake, and they just change so many things at one go, only to arrive at the destination. Yeah, sure, maybe you arrive it earlier, but at what cost?
Mm.
You're hungrier, you're more moody, you're irritable, you're just an asshole all around, right? No one likes to be around you, right? So, number two, uphold or increase food around training. Very important, as you tend to, if you're in a cut and your calories drop lower and lower, nutrient timing becomes more important during that period, especially when it comes to glycogen output and intake,
Mm-hmm.
protein resynthesis, and all these fancy terms that you probably never heard before. It's very important. Adjust food based on hunger. That will be number three.
Yeah.
So when it comes to calorie adjustments, no changes or opposite change in weight. You want to add 10 to 20% calories. If your weight changes at the bottom end of the range, you want to add 5 to 10% calories. If the weight changes at the middle or top end of the range, no change. That's a good place to be in. Weight change is above or below the range of 5 to 10% calories. That's when you add on or reduce. Okay, so that's all for today in this episode of um, energy intake and needs. I will be doing the next three episodes on protein, carbohydrates, and fats. If you guys have any questions about this particular episode, do leave a comment in the comment section below. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to our new YouTube video.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
To the next one.
to the next one, guys.